Hello, hello. Hi, everybody. Say hi as you jump in. Let us know that you're here. I'd love to see who all is here. Welcome. Thank you guys for being here with us. Thank you to our panelists for being here with us. This is a special edition of our PMA Academy sessions as we are really here to celebrate and chat with some of our 2020 Mark Awards nominees. So please, first and foremost, congratulate yourselves and congratulate all of our nominees. Please join me in congratulating all of them, all of our panelists on this session today, and all the rest of our 2020 Mark Awards nominees on their nominations this year. We're super, super, super thrilled. Congratulations, well done, well deserved, all of that. As a reminder, our Mark Awards show is going to be broadcasting next Tuesday, October 6th at 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern. You can watch the show on our website, pmamusic.com/mark-awards. We will be continuing to share that link out with everybody. Feel free to share it, let your friends know, let your composers know, let your businesses know, let whomever know. It'll be a fun show. Before we jump in, I want to say thank you to our PMA Academy session sponsors, APM Music, AdRev, ASCAP, the NMPA, and TuneSat. As always, we appreciate your support. So the purpose of today's panel is really to acknowledge the progress of production music and all of its growth over the years, while also looking at its future. We have a great group of creatives and composers as speakers today, and I would like them to each briefly introduce themselves. I'll start first, just in case anybody here doesn't know me. My name is Morgan McKnight. I'm the Executive Director of the Production Music Association. And then we'll move to Inon. Do you want to start us off with a quick little intro? And Christina, will go to you next.
Hi, my name is Inon Zur, and I'm a composer mainly for video games. Probably familiar with some of the work that I did. I worked on all the Fallout series, Dragon Age series, Prince of Persia, Elder Scroll, a lot of stuff. But I also do a lot of trailers, and that's it, I guess.
Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be here to represent FirstCom Music. I am the film and TV music director and also a producer at FirstCom Music.
Mirela, let's go to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mirela. I'm from Romania. I'm a composer, singer, and violinist. And tonight I'm representing Crime Sonics.
Joe.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm Joe Saba. I am one of the co-founders of VideoHelper, along with Stu Winter, and still an active composer, very much.
And Chris, last but not least.
Coming to you live from Cleveland, Ohio. My name is Chris Harris, and I'm a songwriter, and I've been doing it for about 7 years for production music.
Thank you, guys. So we'll jump into it. We have a lot to cover today. And to our audience here, as you guys have questions, feel free to leave them in the chat box. We'll be monitoring those throughout the entire panel session. Ask them as needed, as relevant, or at the end in a Q&A session. So we're going to start with Joe. Joe, how did you come to the decision to start your own library? How do you think that differs from those starting libraries today? And the third question in that first question, are there opportunities for composers to start their own libraries?
Man, all right. That could be the whole panel, so I'll keep it.
Yeah.
Okay, short version is who is the other co-founder. He was a promo producer at ABC News, and they had music that was not cutting it back in the 90s. It was back when library music had a very tinny, dated reputation. And basically we went to the bar and decided we should try to do something better. And that is why our company is named VideoHelper instead of an actual company name. I think we've been very, very lucky to kind of grow along with the library business. And it has just increased dramatically. It's become a truly global business. The opportunities for composers and libraries have ballooned. Everything from the networks to the explosion in cable, to the explosion in digital, to the platforms, to TikTok. And so I feel like our industry is finally growing up. I feel like the internal perception of where we are is a little different from the external perception, but even that external perception is a lot better than it was a few years ago. The fact that all of you guys are here listening to me ramble on is, I think, a nice, is indicative of that. And I think if you were starting out today, it's probably a lot harder. I think we had it easy because the barriers to entry were a lot higher. So we had to pay to press CDs. There are all kinds of things that stood in our way at the beginning that don't stand in the way of composers now. At the same time, there is so much music that I think it's a lot harder to stand out. And we can talk about it more later. I think all of us should talk about it more. But I think one of the greatest opportunities and challenges that we all face is how do we avoid the commodification of music, and how do we do something unique that is valuable to people and that advances our craft and our art.
Yeah.
I'll stop there. We can.
Great points there. We'll get to more of that later too, for sure. Christina, we're going to move to you. What skills are required of a top production music composer today? Production skills, mixing skills, recording skills, arrangement, and does image play a significant role in anyone that you work with or new composers that you hope to work with or that hope to work with you?
All of the above. I mean, while not necessarily a deal breaker, what I'm usually seeking in a new relationship with a writer or a producer is a jack of all trades, someone who can write, produce, mix, and even master their own work. It's also invaluable to be musically diverse and tuned into where the trends are going. I watch a ton of television, movies, YouTube videos, you name it. So I have a pretty good idea of what clients are going to be asking for. And it's super important to be able to have reliable producers and writers that you can turn to for more than one thing.
And to Chris, kind of similarly-ish on the same line of creation, how does writing for film and TV, how does that process differ from, let's say, top 40 commercial records? Are there things that you always include or things that you avoid? Walk us through your writing process a little bit for film and TV.
Yeah, generally when I'm writing for something that is not production music related, I'm coming from a much more personal space. So the music tends to be a lot more personalized in my approach. But when I'm dealing with production music, my approach is completely different. Like Christina mentioned, she watches a lot of TV. I watch a lot of TV. So I try to create almost a mental vision board for that track. I want to listen to the sounds. I want to think, well, where might this, go well at? Is this like sports heavy? Could this go on a not music video, a movie? All sorts of things are going through my mind, and I create that vision board. And that's generally how I start my writing process. Things that I try to avoid, of course, getting too personal with production music. The things that I want to include, if I'm listening to a commercial and I hear some awesome music in the commercial, I'm taking notes. What lines were used? How were they used? And I try to incorporate those things in the music that I make.
And I'm going to go back to Christina for just a second. I'll follow up to this. Christina, how often are we seeing lyrics being used in placements nowadays? And where are those lyrics being used? What types of placements are we seeing it the most?
Well, it's most of what I see when clients are requesting, especially for big like primetime television or sports promos. They're using, really solid hooks that, tell the message immediately, just in a few short words. That's a really big request. So I'd say it's pretty often the number one thing that I see when clients are asking for music, which I know has not always been the case.
Yeah, so I want to ask maybe Joe, Inon, we'll start with you maybe. How have you seen, what's the progression like for lyrics been in your field in video games? And if you can touch on trailers too a little bit, because I know you have stuff there, but what's that progression been like?
Well, we actually took a very, very different route with video games because, as you know, video games is being translated to gazillion languages, and all the legal procedures to handle these kind of things is almost impossible. So I've just decided, and that was actually, it was in Dragon Age Origins, which was, I don't know, like 10 years ago, that I will come up with my own language. It was really easy. We call it Zurish, and it sounded basically like some cross between Celtic and Hebrew, and it did not have any meanings whatsoever. It was just bunch of syllables. And it worked great because people on one hand didn't really understand what the singer is singing, but on the other hand, they could almost guess because it was according to what's going on in the game, but it sounded foreign. So we achieved a lot of, and again, we're talking about video games here. We achieved a lot of, I think, tasks just with using this kind of method, I guess.
Joe, have you seen an increased usage of lyrical content in the stuff that you guys do? I mean, what's been the shift there, or if any?
A lot. I'd say 5 years ago, it was very much in the margins. It was usually, we'd get a call when somebody wanted to replace a commercial song, or they're using it for a campaign and they needed it for something, you know, to go along with it, or somebody didn't have the budget. And so it was like, all right, can you get me this thing that, you know, is kind of a, you know, is a replacement. And what's happened, I think, is that the songs, production music songs, are written differently, and people have kind of figured out how to create lyrical songs that function. And as a result, the use has just skyrocketed. I'm sure many of our audience, everyone has to deliver lyric and non-lyric versions now. Increasingly, we are being asked for just kind of lyrical phrases, which are semi-specific. So it, and I know a lot of folks are doing that now. So instead of, you're not telling somebody's very specific life story, you're expressing the basic emotion. And those kinds of things, I don't think they're not going anywhere. If anything, that demand is growing. So all of us collectively can, you know, can do stuff.
Interesting. Very cool. Okay. Let's switch gears a little bit and go to Mirela. Mirela, for everyone that doesn't know, which is everybody, I don't think, is in Romania. So she's joining us from Romania. So it's 9 p.m. where she is. And thank you again for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Talk about what it's like for you living in Romania and working with predominantly US clients. How did you build your network, and how are you continuing to build your network? And I guess, what are some impacts and influences that you pull from Romania that contribute or have contributed to your career?
Well, I think for me, I'm just grateful for the magic of internet because it all started on internet for me. And then I moved to London, and that's where I started making, or actually not making, but consolidating the connections I already made on the internet. But yeah, mostly internet and just developing them.
Can you talk about how you got your first placement and what that process was like for you?
My first placement.
You and I talked earlier, and you said it was you got a placement and you kind of took a break. So, and now you're back into it, and Mark Awards nominated, and kind of in the position that you are. So I'm hoping you can walk us through what your life has been like leading up to this point, and kind of how you utilized your connections and utilized your network to get you here.
Yes, I started with the Library of Human Soul, and I wrote a few tracks for them. And back then I didn't understand this concept of you have to constantly write, and it's also a game of quantity as much as it is of quality. So when I saw that nothing much is happening, eventually I've quit. I took a break of about 2.5 years. And last year I started writing again for Crime Sonics, and yeah.
Cool. And you said you have a classical background, but you don't apply that. Tell us about where you found your creative passion in your creation, kind of what your genre style is, what type of music you love to do, and kind of how you perfected that skill or practiced that skill or taught yourself all of these things.
Well, I come from the classical background, so I started as a violinist, and I've learned all the classical music theory and all that, but I've always been, I lived with this passion and aimed to do film scores and things like that. And I started researching. Here in Romania, we don't have these opportunities. So I had to look abroad, and through my contacts, I got to learn more and more about these things. And I came across production music and I got derailed from film scoring and got into production music. And I've learned a whole different set of skills through this. I mean, mixing and recording. It's something that I never even thought of doing before. And I've learned through these opportunities.
Yeah. I think it's super cool that now, and I think this is has contributed a lot to the growth of the industry, the access to resources and kind of the way you can meet people has been huge for our industry. And I think it will continue to do so. So a great point that you made there about the internet in general, but, take advantage of those Facebook groups and those communities and those things that you can be a part of to further grow the industry, I guess, and progress it the way that.
Yes, and the community is very eager to share, like I'm part of some Facebook groups and everybody's so nice and helpful with feedback and pretty much everything. You just have to pop a question and everybody's going to jump in and help you out with that. So it's great. Take advantage of those things.
Absolutely. Okay, let's switch gears just a bit. We'll go back to Inon here. What are some things that differ between video games, doing music for video games, trailer music, and then the other side, sort of production music as far as advertising and television shows? And if a composer is trying to get into video games, what are some steps that they need to take?
Well, they need to understand one very important thing. Movies or commercials or trailers have one beginning, one middle, and one end. Video game has maybe one or two beginnings, probably 10 to 20 ends, and infinite middles. So the approach to compose video games is totally different. Although music is music and composition is composition, and like Mirela, I'm also coming from classical background, and I'm conducting orchestras and doing all stuff. But the style of composition and the way you approach it is totally different. If with movies, TV, or when you score trailers, you really need to be locked to a picture. With video games, the only thing you actually need to be locked to is what kind of emotion you want to evoke, and what is going in the mind of the player when he or she are playing. And this is what you try to portray. This is what you try to basically almost tell them what to feel. And on one hand, it's quite challenging because you just don't really have any sort of like box to start with. You just start with, oh, I feel sad. Okay, what should we write? But on the other hand, it is so cool because you get to write a whole musical cue or a musical piece that has an introduction, has a little development, has a theme, has a proper ending. So it's almost back to like the old way of composition when composers didn't think that they need to be locked to anything.
And what are some steps that a composer would need to take, do you think, to land, a first trailer or first video game job?
I think, like Christina said before, you need to be very, very much tuned to what's going on right now. obviously, you need to be very versatile. You need to know your, craft, but you also need to develop a very, very unique style that will sort of like separate you from the crowd. And then you need to go with it, advertise yourself on YouTube and everywhere and through social media, so people will start noticing you and your style. I would add that, for example, if you remember like 10 years ago, the style the style that like Two Steps from Hell were using was like huge bombastic orchestras with choirs and everything. And lots of people really liked it. But in the last 2-3 years, things are so much different. Trailers became either more electronics or, like you talked before, song driven, or what I'm doing a lot is like string quartets. For example, my trailer for the kindergarten teacher, or like a year before for The Shape of the Water, was like only string quartet. So things are so much different right now, and you need to come up with some original ideas how to create this hook, how to create this very unique sound that will grab the listener from the get-go and will really make them focus into the trailer.
So to elaborate that on a little bit, can you tell us about how you, what's the word I'm looking for? How you trained your skill throughout all of these changes in the business, right? As you said, 10 years ago, things were one way. 2 years ago, it's EDM. How did you transition, and how did you teach yourself, I guess, new things if you needed to, and kind of what was that transition like for you? Was it easy? Was it tough? Tell us about that.
I always believed that in order to be successful at what you're doing, you always need to stay ahead of the curve. You don't need to follow what's going on, but you need to look and to see, all right, so this is what's going on right now. How can we sort of like take this reality, or take what the present and push it toward the future, and to come up with materials that will, like, for example, I remember that there was a trailer that had like a solo violin in it, or like 2 violins, and it was really, really successful. And we thought, all right, so how about we'll take it into like a whole string quartet, and we'll do this sort of like very intimate music, but very intense music. So it'll sound like 4 people are playing vigorously in one room, and create this very intense but small sound. And based of that, we took the idea that was there before, but we pushed the envelope. We sort of like were ahead of the curve, and that like idea started to get a lot of licensing. Same things with like horror. People are using like a lot of like weird sounds for horror trailers. And we said, all right, so let's try to push it further. Why don't we use more organic sound instead of like electronic sound? And we're going to use it the same thing. So instead of like try to synthesize scary sounds, I went to my piano and banged on it, or bowed like guitar in a weird way, or like did all this stuff that is very, very weird but organic. And again, this got a lot of licensing because it took the idea of sound design but pushed it, and this was always my philosophy. In order to succeed in what you're doing, try not to follow or imitate what is really in. Try to look at what's in right now, but push it a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think authenticity too, kind of, making sure you're owning your sound and owning your passion, owning who you are. That authenticity is really important. Like you said, not to mimic anybody, but to really own what you're good at and utilize the influence from what's popular into pushing the envelope for yourself, pushing yourself into growth, I think is really key.
Exactly.
Cool. Okay. Christina, what opportunities do writers at FirstCom have as far as placements? You just talked a little bit about video games and trailers. So video games, ads, trailers, sports promos. Tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing over there, where your placements are going, and what do you think are the top 3 opportunities for Sync placement?
Yeah, I mean, sync opportunities at FirstCom are limitless because our client list is so vast. We have a really heavy presence in advertising, big network promos for sports, primetime television, as well as film and TV source and background music. So I think regardless of the music you write or produce, there's varying opportunity at FirstCom.
Okay, I'm gonna. David Katz just asked a great question. Since we're kind of on this subject, I wanna ask it. I have a bunch of good tracks with vocals, instrumental. Christina, I'll let you answer, and then Joe will let you add anything to this. How do I go about getting into production libraries? Do I contact big libraries, small libraries, independent, big corporations, start your own library? I'll let Christina, you go ahead and start. Joe, add anything to that.
Yes, yes, and yes. I mean, I always say reach out to everyone. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Reach out to the big publishers, reach out to music supervisors, reach out to all the little and big libraries, because at some point someone will bite. And I think it's just about being consistent, but also being gracious. But don't be afraid to, like I said, put yourself out there.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I would say we get a lot of demos all the time. And I think probably the biggest thing you could do as a writer, and this applies to us when we go talk to our clients, is put yourself on the receiving end of whatever it is you're sending them. And so libraries like ours, we're an independent and we're up against the major. So what we're looking for is a lot about what Inon was talking about. So how do we stand out? We're never going to go head to head with Universal on our number of tracks. So what we do has to be different, and it has to complement one of those big catalogs. And so if you can fulfill a need, figure out what people need and give it to them. And that can be conversations. It doesn't have to be a master strategic plan, but talk to people. Or you can go to the big companies' sites and look and say, oh, you know what? I've noticed you guys don't have any music from the Caucasus. I do that, and I do Armenian trap. I could do the sickest Armenian trap music, whatever it is. Figure out where their holes are, and offer to help them. The more you can help somebody, the more likely they are to help you. But a lot of people say, hey, I have amazing music. Why doesn't anybody want to work with me? And it's not just about good music. It's about a relationship and really filling a need. And so to get back to your question, do I contact big libraries, small libraries? Start there. Figure out what you do that fulfills a need. And if nobody else does it and you want to take on the leap of starting your own library, that's great too. I would encourage people to do that. I would also say that it's hard. We've been doing it for 25 years. It's awesome, and it's hard, and it changes every year. But all of and be original. I'll say, even for us, I've been doing this a while now, and one of our biggest placements was from a single violin. So we were talking about what we were talking about before, and I decided to play it with a serrated knife. It was an eBay violin. Don't worry, Mirela over there. I can see you like right. And it was just literally the sound of just and you could feel the thing, kind of disintegrating as the knife was being pulled across it, and that real terrible sound showed up in a whole bunch of big trailers. So I would say, you don't need a lot of money. You don't need a lot of samples. Get away from presets. I would say whatever presets come in, roll your own. Don't do presets. Anyone can download Omnisphere, whatever is, whatever the latest sample pack is on Splice. Just do your own thing. Sorry, that's a bit of a rant there, but
No, that's great. I want Chris to add, to jump in here too and add from his perspective, because he was on the other side of this, on the pitching side of this and not the receiving side of this. So how was it for you? Because you're in FirstCom, you're in everywhere. You're in Warner, you're in Megatrax, I think. You're in, I'll let you continue. Talk us through how it worked for you, what you did, what was successful for you, and what was not successful for you.
You know, I think for me, what's been successful is making sure I sort of have like my shit together first and foremost. So one of the things that I first did was I invested in a website. I invested in professional photography, even small details such as an email address with a domain. And the reason I say that that's important, because if I'm going to reach out to a library unsolicited, right? So they don't know me, I'm just reaching out. There's a better chance of them opening that email if they see that it comes from a domain email address. And then when they actually hopefully click on the website, if it looks professional, they're probably more likely to take that next step to listen to the music. And then, you know, if your music is tight, then hopefully that'll speak for itself. So I think it's just really important to just make sure that you have your stuff together. And just like Joe said, put yourself on the receiving end. I mean, don't send an email with 7 MP3 attachments, right? Don't send 20 links to 20 different songs. Pick your best, 1, 2, 3 songs and send that out. Have a press kit. If they want more information, have your contact information available. I mean, these all sound like very simple things, but if you forget them, you're just kind of digging a hole for yourself.
How did you go from no placements to placements within your majors? What was that process like for you?
I fell into production music really from a friend who had been doing it for years before me. So he sort of made the connection, and Warner Chapel was really the first time that I got into production music. And once I got my first placement, it was almost like this high. And I just loved everything about making production music, that I just wanted more and more. And then I just started to do research and just see, wow, there are a lot of different libraries out here, great libraries that are doing great work. And from then on, I mean, there are people who are in this actual meeting right now that I've reached out to them. You know, we've done work together just because that hunger was there. So I just try to stay hungry, and I'm always down to work, and I love working.
I think that's a great point too, and something that I try to suggest to new composers or anybody kind of in this field is as you build that network, don't just think about contacting libraries, think about what other composers are writing, and can you make friends with the composer and then co-write on a project and kind of, get in that way. Networks are really important, and people who are very important. And I think, building those relationships and co-writing with people is also very helpful in this business, as far as if you were to try to break into a Universal or, whomever. Okay, Joe, coming back to you. Talk to us about what production music historically was, what it is now, and how much it's changed. I know we briefly covered this a little bit. More importantly, where do you see the future opportunities in the business?
Okay, we're at, I think, we're at a really, really interesting time in music. Streaming has finally gone somewhere. I think a lot of boundaries are breaking down about what, 10 years ago, if you had your music in a commercial, you were selling out. Now it's totally fine. And I believe now we're at a place where if you have your music in a library, it doesn't matter. The TikTok generation, they don't care where stuff comes from. And so I think there are incredible opportunities for all of us on every platform. I think as the business becomes global, it's going to be increasingly important for us to connect with each other as musicians and as creators, not just on the business side. I was lucky enough to find the singer on the track that was nominated for the Mark Award in the subway in New York. Just a guy, I was like, hey man, you have a great voice. You want to make some noise? He was like, sure. And Now we have opportunities to connect with people around the world, and those people will inform how you approach the markets. So anybody can be in Romania, and Mirela, we could do a session together, and you could I could learn all about your, Romanian music history. I would love to, and that might lead me down new creative avenues, and that might spur some new kind of hybrid music that hadn't existed before, that a broadcaster might love, or a singer might like, or somebody might want to put in a movie. So I think, there's endless opportunities. I'm trying to think. I think on the business side, I'd like to see the PROs catch up on the detection and the cross-platform stuff. It's a whole business sidebar, but you guys, I can talk about that. We can talk about that at another time. I think that's another panel. But I think the biggest thing is that that's another question. All right, I'll let somebody else step in.
No, I'm actually staying with you for 1 second. What are some mediums that you've had placements in? So like not a TikTok or whomever that didn't exist 10 years ago that exists now.
Okay, so that kind of stuff. I'm trying to think. Well, I mean, all of the digital stuff. Is this a leading question?
I don't know. Netflix, I guess we can.
Yeah, I mean, there's all the Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime,
right.
Disney Plus, Quibi, as long as it, I think it's still rolling. And God, there's new networks and apps coming up all the time. The video games, and those platforms they're huge. They're evolving, and they're the future. I mean, I'm sure every one of us knows somebody who's been on Netflix or Amazon, and the royalties are catching up. Everyone's a little behind, but they'll get there. For those of you who are frustrated with the scene today on the digital platforms, keep in mind that the situation was the same for cable. They lagged about 5 to 10 years behind, but it eventually got there, and it was very substantial. So production music is a get rich very slow game.
All right, definitely, it definitely is. I'm going to transition this because it's on the same topic over to Inon. If you could make one thing better about the business, what would it be? And what do you think some of our challenges as an industry are?
Again, I think that the more original music for trailers mainly could be, the better it is. And this is not only a plague for trailers. Actually, trailers are doing better, but also mainstream movies. People are falling into sort of like the safe zone, and all right, it worked before, it will work now. And basically what happened is it just becomes something that just had been chewed and went over again and again and again and again. I mean, who cannot recognize this piano riff that goes like from A minor to F to C to G, like you hear it like, come on guys, can you maybe find something else a little bit more interesting? And again, I'm saying it from a personal level as a composer, that I'd like to hear something that is a little bit more innovative. And I think that it's getting there. So what we really need to see is basically more and more visionaries in the production side, as far as the music that are looking for, instead of like, again, falling into the same pigeonhole again and again and again. This will also present more opportunities to newcomers and new composers to voice their own voices, rather than go back to the same thing again and again and again, and then to the same composers that are doing this things again and again and again.
Very well said. Okay, so I want to go to Mirela, back to Mirela. I'm going to switch back to a little bit of a creative conversation. Mirela, talk to us about where you find your inspiration to create your music. And I'm going to ask Chris a similar question after. when you're creating songs, do you feel as though they have a definitive place for them to go when you are creating them, or are you creating from, you know, solely from your soul and spirit, and how is that working for you?
Yeah, it all starts from an emotional background for me. I'm a very emotional person. So that's my main provider. That in nature. I need visual stimulation. So yeah, I'm always looking to express a certain emotion, or maybe the brief requires that. And that's how it all starts.
Yeah. And Chris, same question to you. And then, you know, I think you mentioned this earlier, but do you have a definitive home for tracks that you create? Are you writing pieces first and then trying to find a catalog for them? Or are you working on commission under direction, somewhere in between?
Yeah, well, as far as the inspiration goes, a lot of times I might hear something in the show and I'm like, ooh, I like that song. I wish I created that. Stuff like that inspires me. Or if, you know, Christina and the team at FirstCom put out something and I'm listening to it and I'm just jamming, that kind of stuff inspires me too. So other artists definitely inspire me to sort of push it forward. But when I'm actually creating a project, I tend to have an idea of where I want tracks to go. So I may have an idea of, you know, these tracks might be good at this library or that library. And then, you know, I can sort of start my pitch. There are other times where I'll just have the project and, you know, me and my team, we'll just kind of basically put the project in a package and then we can shop it that way. And the reason I try to do that sometimes is, you know, I want to create as little work for a lot of these libraries as possible. You know, they have a lot of things going on. So if I can basically come through with a ready-made project, it just makes it easier on both ends.
This is a question for all of you, but I'm going to start with Mirela. I can answer this one first. I hear this question a lot. I see it a lot on Facebook groups. I see, you know, composers asking constantly, how do you know when you're done? So to all of you, how do you know when you're finished? How do you know when your song is done? How do you know when your project is finished? How do you know when you're done? And I'd like to look at it. Obviously, there's a very common answer, and a lot of times it's the deadline. But outside of a deadline, let's take the deadline off of it. How do you know when you're done? Mirela, we'll start with you. We'll go to Inon, then we'll go to Christina, then Chris and Joe.
Well, for me, it's not the deadlines. It's usually the client. If he says it's done, then it's done. Because usually I feel like I could always do more. I could always tweak something. I can add, I can take out. So yeah, if I work on my own projects, then whenever I feel like I've expressed everything the way I wanted and whatever I wanted, then it's done. But when I'm working with clients, it's usually their call. Unless I still have something to add and I'm like, no, wait.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Inon, when do you know when you're done?
That takes me back many years ago, maybe 20 years ago, when I wrote like tons of music for the Power Rangers and Beetleborgs, and I was working for the Fox Family Channel and Mr. Haim Saban, if you heard about him. I remember like his thing was all about like, all right, we got to go. It's a quantity thing. Let's just go. So the the famous sentence is, good enough, next, was like, that was like the Bible. Good enough, next. No, it is never good enough. And you really don't really want to go next until the two things happening. The first thing is, like Mirela says, it is the client who will decide when you're done or when you're not done. But before you even turn the music into the client, and of course within the deadlines, I believe in writing something, then let it sit, even for half hour, not more than that. And then go do something else and then revisit it. I can guarantee you that you will find at least 2 to 3 things that's like, oh, that could be done better. And the most important thing is, Know when to let go. Yes, you can always make it better, but you need to know that it's a work for hire and you've done whatever you could in these circumstances. So let go and let's move.
Yep, Christina, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess speaking as the client in this scenario, I think it depends on the type of project. If it's a super specialized song-focused project, like something from FirstCom's Capital Studio Masters label, I'm not done until every lyric, every melody, every snare, every note is perfect. I think most of the writers that I work with can attest to this. In my opinion, it's not done until it's radio ready. If it doesn't measure up to something that you would enjoy from a consumer standpoint, it's not ready for sync. And I think that's just the bar I'm trying to set for production music.
Go ahead, Chris.
I'd say it's a feeling with me. If it just feels done. And generally what I'll do is after I get that feeling, I'll try to sleep on it if I can. And like Inon said, you come back with maybe 2 to 3 different things that you might want to add or change in the track. But of course, don't spend all year on it. But that's generally what my process is.
Okay, and Joe.
As a writer, I'd say when I no longer want to drive into a wall at more than 20 miles an hour. And on the other side, I would say, actually, I would say one thing composers out there who are working with libraries and getting feedback that they may disagree with. Sometimes feedback comes from a musical place. Sometimes it comes from a storytelling place. Sometimes it comes from a place of we need to balance out this album with a song that is great on its own, but now is directly stepping on somebody else's toes. So we need to move you guys a little further apart. And that if you are able to approach the project with an open mind and be flexible and realize that the music is also a tool and as part of a storytelling function and it's intended to be part of another story, everything gets a lot easier. That doesn't mean the feedback gets any less crazy, but at least, and clients may not always be able to articulate which one of those things that they are asking you to change. So just try to keep an open mind. That's what I would say.
Okay. All right, we have about 12 more minutes. I have one more question on my list. There's a couple questions in the chat. If anyone else has questions, put them in the chat now so we can get to those in the last 10 minutes. But I want to wrap up at least my questions with a very simple-ish question to me. Agree or disagree? Production music is just music. Why or why not? Now, this question comes from a place of, again, we've addressed here that historically production music was one thing, and there's been so much change and so much growth, and we're seeing now companies put out full album releases, and these albums are getting released on Spotify, and things are changing. So we've kind of gotten to a point in production music where it used to be one thing. It's still kind of perceived as that thing, but at the end of the day, it's music. It's just music. You can listen to it on Spotify. You can play it in your car on the way to work. If we ever get to drive back into work again, yeah, that's the question. Production music is music. Agree or disagree? Why or why not? Inon, we'll start with you.
It has to be music. And not only that it has to be music, it has to be music that stands out, that making sense, and that has something unique about it. Think about the trailers that change things. Think about the trailer, for example, for Inception with the famous Inception, this changed so many things. I'm going even back to when James Newton Howard, I think, or Harry Gregson Williams, I think it was James Newton Howard, wrote this amazing music for the trailer of the dinosaur movie. And I don't know if you remember that. That was like, I mean, 15 years ago. And the music was really amazing, and it set a new benchmark for trailers. So not only that it needs to be music, it needs to be something that is so concise, so focused, and so unique, because you need to say so many things in so little time. And it just takes, it's a huge challenge. And when you approach any trailer, you need to approach it first and foremost from a musical point of view, from originality point of view, and from an emotional point of view. And only then you stand pretty good chance for it to be licensed. This is my opinion.
Perfect. Christina, is production music is music, agree or disagree? Why or why not?
Hell yeah, it's music. 1,000% it's music. I'm very passionate about that. As I said, it's become somewhat of a mission of mine to change the stigma around the musicality of production music. The times have changed. The pool of talent in the industry is deep and the competition is heavy. When you put the focus on artistry, production value, good songwriting, the music speaks for itself. I don't think anyone in the music industry can dispute that.
Chris, to you.
Absolutely, it's music. It speaks to me. I'm always jamming out to it. I mean, what more do I need to say? It's music.
All right, Mirela, to you.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Yes, it's absolutely music. And I know everybody's complaining about, you know, especially with trailers being too repetitive or having a very strict structure and everything. But I think it still serves a purpose, and it's still, it can serve an emotional canvas and support it. And yeah, I think it's like Inon said, you know, it's kind of like film scoring, but harder because you have to compact it. So yeah, it's definitely music. You can jam on it, you can enjoy it, and agreed.
All right, Joe, to you.
Well, yeah, clearly yes. You know, it drives me crazy when production music gets put into these categories, or on the business side, when the royalty agencies or other licensing collectives don't even realize that the music is no more or less than any other music, and we should be included as a part of you know, any of these societies in the same way as any other category of music. I mean, if you're saying, okay, music that is created to help tell a story, then I mean, Bach's Mass in B minor doesn't make the cut, right? Like, you know, like production music has been around forever. Mozart wrote divertimentos. They had a specific purpose. He had a function. That's what we're doing. You know, maybe not me specifically, but that's, you know, there is absolutely, there shouldn't be any distinction at all. Production music is music, period.
And Joe, I want to stay with you, so don't unmute quite yet. You touched on this briefly about kind of recognition and technologies, and we do have a question from Todd Graybeck about what music recognition technologies do you prefer for the tracking and identification of production music? So let's talk a little bit about what tech exists for that now, and kind of what our future hopes and goals would be from an association standpoint, kind of anything that we can say there that's our future goals and kind of what we're working towards on some of these digital detections.
Okay, I'll keep it short. In the States, the societies are using digital technologies. They're using digital fingerprinting technologies, which means that they're basically taking it's like a Shazam kind of a situation to track and pay on some kinds of royalties, but not many. The technologies they are using are not available for the composers or the publishers to see. And so that is something that we would love to change. For my company, we use a combination of BMAT and TuneSat, which are great technologies. They are very expensive. It is difficult for an individual composer to have access to the technology that will allow them to track their music accurately and comprehensively. I would love for that problem to be solved by a tech company. Globally, there are other societies that are further ahead. Some have moved like Boom to full digital detection and payouts. And that streamlines the process. The global registration of works has been a big advancement. So I don't want to come down too hard on the PROs. They are moving, but we have a long way to go. And if we don't streamline the process, one of the concerns is that some of the bigger global platforms will just simply try to sidestep it. And so we don't want that to happen either. We do want to support the PROs in their mission. I particularly don't want to negotiate, with Amazon every time they play my music. I do not want to sit across the table from Bezos and try to get money out of him.
Inon, I'm going to throw it to you. Can you talk a little bit about some of these technological challenges and maybe how they impact the video game world, and also where you think that can improve, or we can improve as an industry on the digital, like the DSPs and things like things like that?
Well, again, I want to hark on what Joe said. The thing is this, I heard last year that, the PROs will become obsolete in a year or two. I really, really hope this is not true. I think that we as a community of composers and producers, and you as one of our representations, should really fight with BMI, ASCAP, and CSAC and the rest of the PROs to start moving to the 21st centuries. And I must say that BMI started doing it for video games. They did cut a great deal with Twitch, and we started getting some royalties from Twitch. They did cut some agreements with Sony PlayStation. But like Joe says, this is really, really just the beginning. In this time of stream is everything, we don't really get to listen to music anymore like we used to. I mean, everything is streaming and we have to chase it. For video games, it's even more challenging from a technical point of view, because how can you really track all the music that being played offline? How can you really approach this issue? We've been really being like a neglected artists when it came to royalties for such a long time. Now things starting to get step by step, but there is a huge amount of way to go, and we're facing a lot of challenges when it comes to this.
Yeah, definitely a long way to go. Progress being made, to Joe's point, but we will get there. I think we'll get there. We've come so far already that I think we'll get there. Let's see, I have probably time for one last question. There's been a couple people that have asked what the pitch is like, how people are pitching to libraries, how to pitch to libraries. I'm gonna flip this to Christina from the music director producer side. I know you said when you are looking for new artists, you're kind of looking for a jack of all trades, but what are some maybe technical or tangible steps that work for contacting a library? Chris mentioned earlier providing a link, not download, or not attaching MP3s. Maybe doing research and knowing who to reach out to. Any of those things that are tangible that could help in a pitch to a library would be helpful.
Yeah, we make it very simple at FirstCom for composers and producers to be able to submit their music. We actually use an inbox through Disco. It's really simple to be able to include your bio, include a website link, your social links, any placement links that you might have. That's actually super helpful if you have that. We'd love to see what kind of placements you've gotten and how your music's been used. I think Chris mentioned this, pick your best 5 tracks, you know, that best represent your sound and your style, you know, especially if you're diverse in a number of different styles, you know, to be able to see and hear how good you are in those different areas, that's super helpful. Because like I said, the number one thing, while not a deal breaker, is a producer that's very diverse that I can rely on for a number of different things. But yeah, like I said, it's super easy to be able to submit music to us. Our entire production team has access to that inbox. So you're not just reaching me, you're reaching my entire team.
Joe, do you have anything to add as last points from a library standpoint?
I think I've said my stuff. I think I'd love to hear from Chris to see what has been most successful and maybe what mistakes, you know, composers can avoid.
You know, I think what Christina mentioned was perfect, especially if a library has sort of that online portal. But for me, of course, doing research is really the first and foremost thing that I'll have to do. Additionally, if you're pitching a song to multiple libraries, what I try to do is communicate that. I want to be upfront that, hey, you know, I sent this pitch to someone else, just so that they understand that that song may not be available for a long time. And I think that that's really important. That's pretty much like what I have as far as pitching. And just bring your A game, bring your best stuff.
And keep practicing and keep perfecting your skill, and don't stop pitching. Do not stop pitching. There's so much opportunity in this space. You know, I think everyone's heard that here today. Plenty of opportunity, plenty of talent, plenty of resources. So don't stop. Keep going. Stay authentic. Stay creative. What did I miss? That's it. Okay.
So I'd say, yeah, respect the business and it'll respect you back. And actually, I want to thank all the panelists and Morgan for doing an awesome job today. Thank you, Morgan.
Thank
Michelle,
you.
behind the scenes.
And great questions too.
Keeping us up.
Thank you, guys. So that's it. I will let you all go. I appreciate all of your time today. This will be available for watch back if anyone is interested in watching it back. Thank you again to our sponsors, APM, NMPA, TuneSet, ASCAP, and AdRev. And the Mark Awards will be next Tuesday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern time. So we will see you there. Thank you guys all for joining us. We'll see you next time.